Would Yamaha actually be better off without Fabio Quartararo? Has MotoGP been better off without Marc Marquez? Those are just some of the frankly incendiary questions from the Race Members Club, which we're going to delve into in this episode of the Race MotoGP podcast. I'm Matt Beer, with me as usual, Simon Patterson, Val Harunchi. In every post-race podcast, we invite the Race Members Club to fire questions at us, and they do, and it's brilliant. But we're recording so quick after the races. We've got our 1 hour slot, and usually, even in a season that hasn't always been the most exciting, we run out of time to do some of the bigger picture stuff. So for this first off-season episode, I've gathered loads of Members Club questions on some bigger topics that weren't very Sunday afternoony, and us three are going to rattle through them in this next hour now. If you want to join that kind of barrage of questions to us every race day Sunday, and you haven't yet joined the Members Club, our Black Friday special offer, which runs from about the time you watch this podcast, gives you 50% off your first month. So you can enjoy us at half the price over the Christmas period, in which you can check out loads of our extra 2015 content, more on that later, and then stick around for the year at full price, if you like. Hopefully we can persuade you. Anyway, Val, Simon, we're going to start with an absolute monster of a question from regular question asker Jay Ferreira. I always love it when a question starts with, "This might be unpopular." That sounds like a really Simon thing to say. Except Jay sounds sort of apologetic about it. So let's go. I heard Simon comment, says Jay, on how Yamaha lost their trademark smoothness in the Hunt of More Power, which was a campaign led by star rider Quartararo. Basically, my point is, shouldn't Yamaha let Quartararo leave? This might unsettle people, argues Jay, due to his obvious raw talent and recent performances. For me, he's clearly second most talented after Marc Marquez. But I mention Marc because just like Marc at Honda, Fabio is dragging a Yamaha to ridiculous heights, performing too well compared to what the bike should be able to do. Shouldn't Yamaha let him go and focus on building their bike like they know how to, and not just have a superstar blind you with his talent and demand for extra horsepower? Now, Jay does continue for a bit. It's one of our longer messages. I feel like I've read enough to give a gist of it. It's basically, Jay's point is, Honda needed in the end, potentially, to lose Marc Marquez to start rebuilding properly. Simon, is Yamaha in that position? And Val, you're welcome to then agree or disagree. Knowing it's Yamaha, you might disagree.
So first of all, I feel like I'm obliged to say that Jay should never apologize for starting anything with an unpopular opinion, because I've made a career out of that.
Yes, true. We love you for it. So the social media.
I don't think so is the answer, because I think Yamaha are in a totally different place from where Honda were whenever they lost Marc Marquez, because Yamaha are building a completely new motorbike that they have to build. And I think that alters the dynamic quite a bit. We first wrote this thing about how the V4 was going to be mandatory under the new rules like a year and a half ago. Yeah. And because as the width of the bike is being reduced, the size of the aero package is being reduced. So the narrower the bike you have, the bigger the aero package you have remaining. And that has weirdly, for me, making a technical statement has now become like the accepted view in MotoGP, to the extent that I spoke to Yamaha boss Paolo Pavizio on the Wednesday, whenever Yamaha were doing their private test after the Valencia test. And he basically told me that in a very authoritative way that made me feel quite good, in a way that my technical stuff normally doesn't make me feel, because I'm always there's a bit of imposter syndrome with it, because I'm not very good at it. But we were on the ball with that one. So they're building this whole new V4 that has to be built, and it actually seems that by letting Andrea Dovizioso build the V4 along with Augusto Fernandez and not letting Fabio have all that much input into it, that it's become more Yamaha than the current M1 is. They've kind of being able to go back to a bike that is a bit more Yamaha power delivery, smoothness, a bit more Yamaha corner speed. All of the guys have said over and over and over again that it has Yamaha DNA. And I think that's maybe something that the current inline four doesn't have, because of the way that Fabio has kind of twisted it and morphed it into what it is right now, in an attempt to stay relevant, essentially, with the everyone else's V4s. And with that work, I mean, it's not done, but it's close to done now. It's getting to the point where they're going to have to race a V4 and kind of conclude the first step of the project. You want the guy who's going to be able to override the bike and be really, 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 really good on it, rather than the guy who's going to be not that good on it, because you're locking into a contract cycle that's going to be, the decisions made in the next probably 3 months decide Yamaha's next 2 years and maybe longer. And the bike might be good enough in 2 years to fight for championships if you have a superstar talent on the grid, and there's only 3 of them. So if you've got one, just start delivering wheelbarrows of cash to his house and do everything you can to keep him, because you have to. You have to keep him. Unless you're confident that you're going to sign a Marc Marquez or a Pedro Acosta, you have to keep Fabio Quartararo. You can't lose him for no other reason than if you put him on another bike, an Italian bike, then that's one other bike that whoever replaces him is going to have to beat, because he's going to be better.
Yeah, the disaster proposition of this is obviously if you don't sign Quartararo doesn't just go away. He signs for one of your rivals, and you're in big trouble. That was always the Marc Marquez consideration. Yeah. Also, in consideration with a bunch of other riders, like we always say about the 2019 Jorge Lorenzo move that didn't work for Honda, that there was still an added benefit to it in not letting Jorge Lorenzo ride some of the other bikes that he might have actually been good at.
Petronas Yamaha.
So, yeah, for instance,
specifically, he would have won the 2020
Yamaha.
title on.
Potentially.
Oh, I love that.
Potentially, yeah. But for me, I understand the gist of the argument. I think it is a fair argument to make, and I think it is a fair way for Yamaha to potentially see things if they do see things. It's not that they need to shed Fabio. I think the bike development aspect of this for me is a little bit of a red herring. I think the presence of Fabio should not automatically make your bike development efforts less good if your process is sound. Basically, if the structure is there, if the other riders, including the test riders, are there, even if you don't necessarily maybe trust so much what Fabio wants out of the bike, you still want the guy who is going to deliver the most out of it. And in their current lineup, he's the guy. And in current MotoGP, he's one, as Simon says, one of the 3, 4, maybe 2 guys that you want. It's a question of, if he agrees to ride for free, obviously, sign him to a 15-year deal, sign him to a 20-year deal. That is not going to happen. He will not agree to ride for free. He is on big money right now. And there's every reason to believe, from how Fabio carries himself, from how he speaks, from the new watch that he has every other weekend, that costs exorbitant amounts of money, that he will not agree to, let's say, like a pay decrease, right? That you're probably going to have to actually pony up more, even though arguably, as good as he is, you are not getting the value return on the contract that he currently is on. What they are paying him, his presence on that bike is not worth, because they're not getting anything out of the bike, because the bike is a hard limit. And we still haven't seen enough from the V4 to suggest that honestly, I believe it will be a hard limit in 2026, not because I distrust the Yamaha technical structure, but because they're catching up to everybody in the final year of a regulation cycle on a very different project. It's just difficult to make that turnaround, even if somehow, by miracle, halfway into the season, it's a winning bike. That's already half of the season gone, and then you're going into a reset anyway. I have to be honest, I'm also not super optimistic about 27 for that same reason, not because I don't distrust the Yamaha technical project or whatever, but because it's not a big enough regulations change in many ways, apart from the switch of the tires. A lot of people have mentioned, Simon, but you agree with that, don't you? Apart from the switch of the tires, that it's not a big enough regs change in certain areas to where all the buildup is just totally erased, to where we don't expect Ducati to still be good in 27, for instance.
I mean, no, because it isn't a big enough regulation change, but the tires are changing.
No, you're right.
Yeah. And that's the fundamental bit. That's the bit that kind of changes the balance of everything, is that the tires are going to flip the series on its head. The strongest argument I've heard made is that we shouldn't be doing a regulation change and a tire change in the same year. That is fundamentally a huge undertaking, and that is going to be the thing that kind of really, really flips it up and down. And that's come from like vacodynamic engineers at factories who are building the new bikes. They don't want both to change at once because of the, how spectacularly wrong you could get it.
Well, Yeah.
To me, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, exactly.
No. I mean, from our point of view.
Yeah, that's great.
100%. But if you're a Yamaha engineer or a rider who's trying to figure out what team to sign for.
Yeah.
It has to be a question for them, to get back to my point. It has to be a question for them of what they realistically believe, like what their chances are for 27, how high they can actually, honestly, looking inwardly, aim for 27, 28. Because otherwise, so let's say you have to pay Fabio over the odds again, because I think he's going to be quite cranky start of 2026. Again, he's going to try to use the situation to get the maximum pay packet for himself again. And he's not going to take kindly to any lowballing of any kind, to any sort of conditions that Yamaha sets in front of him, conditions that might include, hey, can you be nicer to us in the media, please, generally speaking, which I think, to be fair, that has been kind of a public discussion, public-ish, between the Quartararo camp and the Yamaha camp. And I do think he's kind of made an effort over the last few rounds to, I don't want to say be nicer, but just cut himself off whenever he wants to say something. Yeah. Whenever he wants to go into his usual Fabio
it's
thing.
That recent, isn't it? I'm thinking back to like October-ish, and that was not the case. It was very much heart on sleeve, and heart was angry.
When did I do the interview with Pavicio where he was like, sometimes it's better to give someone a slap in the back and a kick in the arse regarding Fabio? That's not that
right
long
before
ago.
the return to Europe, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And he kind of acquiesced, sort of, but you can sometimes also see that Fabio's heart is not in it. There's a part of it that wants to be dramatic about it. He was very level-headed about the bike in the postseason test, about the new V4, but he also could barely speak. Like, he had no voice. He was clearly ill with something, wasn't doing too great. But I do think he's making an effort, and I do think there can be a joint understanding there where the money makes sense for everybody, the role makes sense for everybody, the timeline makes sense for everybody. But if he's really trying to squeeze out the maximum out of it, then you risk a situation where you pay over the odds for a rider that then, because of your technical situation, you can't really use. And then every weekend becomes, again, you get like 2 more years of the rider going in front of the media and going, look, I did everything today, but the bike won't turn, it won't accelerate out of the corners, it doesn't brake well, it doesn't do anything. I had to chuck it into the gravel out of 5th place because that's the only place where it deserves to be. It's bad for the brand, it's bad for team morale. It's not ideal. And I think we cannot totally underestimate or throw out the effect that the millstone of the Marc Marquez expectations has had, removing that millstone on Honda. Honda has clearly benefited from just being able to hide from that and hunker down and work a little bit without the constant sadness that is brought by the fact that you're letting down one of the greatest of all time with every walking moment. I'm not saying Fabio is one of those. No. But he is one of the greatest on the current grid.
Yes.
And there is the perception that he is being let down every weekend, every session exists. It exists not just outside, not just like all of the press back will tell you that Yamaha has let Fabio down. That is a very 150% opinion everywhere. So if you can't be sure that you're going to be in a position where you're no longer taking that hit every weekend, I think you have to really think about how much you can commit towards Fabio and how much that the pain of that, the negativity of that. There's a reason teams sometimes cut riders before the end of their contract where they're too much of a bummer to have around. I mean, Johan Zarco KTM is obviously the famous example, but I also think it's not just because Maverick Vinales tried to blow up the Yamaha. It's because he tried to blow up the Yamaha and he was too much of a bummer to have around. I think that was absolutely part of it. I think if he was performing at a different level or was a more positive figure generally and less erratic figure that just had one weekend of craziness, there would be no question about his contract being terminated. But because they were like, we can't do this anymore. This is too much. This is making everybody sad. So you have to go. I am slightly wary of Yamaha ending up in that situation longer term again. That's the devil's advocate argument, and I don't think it's a terrible one.
So I need to go off on a random tangent here just to pick up on this because it's Maverick Vinales related. My new favorite thing on social media is Jorge Lorenzo basically posting Rocky-style training montages of him working out with his new rider, Maverick Vinales.
We have I have put aside a question later that is allowing us to go into the glory of the new Jorge Lorenzo Maverick Vinales partnership, which, this MotoGP is very good at going on holiday. That news does tend to kind of stop from Valencia till the launches. So for that to be potentially the only piece of news that happens in the final 6 weeks of 2025, is wonderful.
I dig it. I'm
here for it too.
Everyone hold your thoughts on Vinales and Lorenzo.
Okay, well then to go back to Quartararo briefly, there is one thing, Val, that I think needs saying to caveat what you said about Yamaha letting down Fabio, and it's that Fabio signed up for this.
Sure.
He knew what he signed up for. He knew that the process of building a V4 was going to take time. And he is rotating through a collection of watches at the minute that each one of which is worth more than my house. And that is not an exaggeration. He's like, for the MotoGP listening watch nerds, there's like 2 million euros of watches in circulation. There's like APs and there's Pateks and there's Rolexes and there's the boy has really put his money on his sleeve this year with his watch collection, and that is because he is suffering at Yamaha. That's his, every time he checks the time, he thinks, oh, well, that's shit. But isn't that a lovely AP Royal Oak I'm wearing? Val also made me think of something else, which is basically that what Jay's question is, like what Jay has said, is exactly what Yamaha are going to tell themselves internally should Fabio leave.
Yes, 100%.
Like
externally to media, briefing off the record, 100%.
Yeah, it is. It will be the internal narrative of, oh, we're better without him, should he go to somewhere else.
Just a small tangent, because this is the tangent podcast at this point. We're going to do
as opposed to our usual very linear progress
in the media center,
and our strong scripts. Sorry, keep talking.
In the media center, I've genuinely felt like I was 12 again, because I remember looking at those watches, like the previous watches and the new watch that he came in with, and remembering the question that I asked when I was growing up, which is, how does a thing that tells time cost that much? And you know what? I'm still there. 20 years later, still 100% there. For me, this is just naked classism.
Well, but imagine something with the same number of components as a MotoGP bike that fits on your wrist.
Yeah, but instead of you riding it at speed and like getting to touch the face of God, it tells time.
I mean, my laptop's doing that right now. Put it in the top corner.
Yeah, but try strapping your laptop to your wrist and see how.
As soon as this is finished, I will. See how it goes.
I like watches, so I can't judge them at all. I think it's far better. So basically, my fundamental thing with watch collecting versus like car or motorcycle collecting, which you would think is what I would probably gravitate towards, is that watches gain value the more used they are. And I hate people that buy classic cars and park them in an air-conditioned garage and don't drive them.
That's 100%.
So at least Fabio's wearing his watches.
Fair.
And this takes us back to Jorge Lorenzo, who has a car collection that he never drives because they're investments.
Where was I? Time, both for how we're doing the running time, but also this is the thing with the Quartararo situation, which I think is kind of unique in the current rider contract chin scratching. The timelines just do not match in any way that works. Like Yamaha, logically, I know it's not as big a rule change in some ways, but Yamaha logically should just go, okay, forget 2026, just chuck everything we've got and make sure our 27 bike is really, really, really good. But it's doing the V4 for this kind of weird dead rubber year and hoping there's enough of a carryover, hoping it's learning as much, because not solely to impress Fabio, there will be learning. There is a point to it as well. Yeah. But publicly, the most obvious measure of whether it was worth Yamaha doing the V4 for the last year of this rules is it making Fabio any happier? Is it keeping him in the right mood going into this signing or not signing of contracts? And he's got his contract ending at a time when he can't. He could go, all right, let's just give it 27 as well. Let's just see if Yamaha does turn it around these rules. But then he's got to really hope there's a mid-2024 style contract torpedo going on somewhere else to free up a space, because everybody else will be locked in for at least 2 years in the big teams. Now, I guess, big flip of rules, if another major manufacturer really gets their Pirellis on back to front, then there could be all kinds of chaos going on. And there could be people going, actually, can you just pay me off to get out of here? Or can I pay you off to get out of here? It's not impossible. Someone else could try to blow up their bike or their Pirellis. But realistically, everyone is making their bets for the first 2 years of this rule cycle minimum now.
Yeah, no, you're right. But that's the issue. And ultimately, like, I don't think they're doing it for Fabio 2026. I think there's enough of a learning. I think ultimately it is just a whole different engine configuration. Obviously, the capacity changes, but they'd rather have this extra year of it than not. I mean, that's a very important part of why they're doing it.
This kind of relates to Jay's question, though, in that if Quartararo wasn't there right now, you wouldn't be looking to that V4 to make a splash at the start of 2026 at all. You'd be going,
and you
great,
still shouldn't be.
Season of learning. But now you're going to be looking at whether he's finishing his sentences or not in his media debriefs to actually.
I think it is important for them to still safeguard the entire project and everybody working on it and the moods of everybody by going, look, however it starts, it's fine. We know it's fine. It's fine. If it's half a second off where the inline 4 was, it's fine. It's
which
just
it's not so far.
Which it actually looks quite good. I think it looks quite good.
It's on the level of the inline 4 at this point.
The problem is that we're being the drip feeding of actual lap times. It's obviously always going to be single lap, isn't it? And the single lap stuff has looked good. But all the worrying stuff that we've heard has always been like, it just doesn't hold up consistently over race distance, and it's a nightmare on used tires. But it's just not ready at all. Yeah. Like, it's like we know that it's just not what it is supposed to be come Sepang, the preseason testing, and then come.
And it's not a race bike. It's an 850 engine in a frame that it's been shoehorned into to be able to do these wildcards. They're still engine developing in a frame that's just something bodged together, essentially.
I think there is like the ultimate most, I don't want to say Moneyball, but the most sort of smart program manager solution out of this is if you can somehow identify who's the next guy who isn't currently on the grid, who might be a problem for Marquez, who nobody's a problem for Marquez, but you know what I mean. Might be a problem for an aging Marquez, Pedro Acosta, Fabio Quartararo, Marco Bezzecchi, Jorge Martin, blah, 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 Pecco Bagnaia, whatever. And try to offer them the kind of career security and pay packet that none of the other manufacturers, and try to get them to buy in and basically win that way, win on a rookie contract with a rookie sort of devotion to your cause that you're not going to get from the mercenaries on the current grid, including Fabio Quartararo. No disrespect to him. Again, go get your watches or whatever. That's probably the best way around it. It's to, as Matt says, to align the timelines, to have somebody who is happy to grow while the project is growing, because Fabio Quartararo will not feel he has any growing to do. He's done growing. He'll wants to win, wants a bike that can do it. If he ends up on that bike and then some shortcomings come out, then that's a different conversation. But right now, he will not be very amenable to, like, what do I need to improve, etc. So that's a problem. I think still, with all that we've said, for me, you keep him if you can. Yeah, of course. But you can, as Simon very wisely said, they will talk themselves into... Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
They will talk themselves into why, if he leaves, why it's actually okay. And I don't even think they'll sound totally ridiculous doing it. And I think there'll be some cool off-the-record briefing in that case over also how he was dragging everybody down in terms of mood and blah, 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 and how he was asking for too much and how, taking some of the pressure off is good, et cetera, et cetera.
Because Paolo Pavizio is not afraid to do that kind of thing. Lynn Jarvis wouldn't do it, but Pavizio would. There is one problem, Val, with your theory on why Yamaha should sign David Alonso.
Because somebody else will?
No, it's that Yamaha have really kind of limited their options by signing a 30-year-old rookie who's not that guy and taking up one of their spots.
Well,
Toprak's not going to win MotoGP titles.
Oh,
I think I agree. Although genuinely,
that's no ill will on Toprak, but he should have been. He could have won MotoGP titles if he'd come here at 24, and he didn't do it.
Yeah,
and that's maybe
age and background
ageist,
wise. No, it's realistic. Talent is a different thing. Mm-hmm. It would be. I'm really excited to see him, but I've got cautious expectations that I really want to be proved wrong, because I think he's a brilliant addition to the grid as a showman and a personality, and as much as his fan base can bring negatives, it's another area of the world that could do with some representation at the top of MotoGP as well. So all that is good. But I agree. But I want to move on to the rest of the Yamaha lineup very quickly, because I have questions about that as well. And you say obviously Toprak is taking up a space, but so are some other guys. Jack Miller is one who we don't have any questions about. We've talked about Jack quite a lot recently. But Alex Rins, Nico says, do you think we evaluated the season Rins had too harshly, considering he's ended up only a few points behind Jack Miller and therefore is close to being second best Yamaha?
No.
I think I'm also shaking my head inside.
Well,
he's on a factory bike. He should have been clearly the second best Yamaha, especially against an old fart like Miller. who'd appreciate me calling him that. But you know what I mean. Jack's there to develop the bike. He's not there to be the guy that's putting it on the line. And I just think Alex didn't do enough of that this year. There wasn't enough. There was a little bit at the end where he was able to like dig, where it felt like he looked a little bit racy, a little bit like the old Alex Marquez or Alex Rins, but he spent too much of the year cruising.
I should say
cruising implies lack of effort, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know about that. You think lack of effort or just lack of some fundamental shift that he needs?
I think just lack of willingness to risk hurting himself to finish 10th and instead finishing 18th. And that's not what you want to drive forward your factory project.
I don't think it's that. I think it's just the complexion of the modern MotoGP weekend. I think he's having the Enea Bastianini problem, the Brad Binder problem. He's become, and maybe always was, a dodgy one in that respect, but certainly become a lot more of a fundamentally extremely limited qualifier. I don't want to say poor because all of these guys are very good in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
but by
poor
MotoGP
can be a relative term.
By MotoGP standards, he's an extremely poor qualifier. Like, I've crunched the numbers. If I'm not mistaken, if you look at sort of the average qualifying gap by taking the relevant sessions, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, the biggest one is Zarco and Chantra, who are running into different categories this season. Basically, it's insane. Yeah. But
they literally were running two different bikes. They weren't really teammates.
Yeah. But those bikes were not 1.2 seconds apart on average. I'm 1.2 seconds.
I have no idea what Chantra was riding, but it wasn't a current. You know what I mean?
No, it's true. They gave up on him very early as a project. Yeah. But there's 0.6 between Fabio and Alex Rins on average. 0.6 on average is real bad. It's real bad. There's just no way around it. It's worse than Binder, Acosta, and Binder got whitewashed this season. Yeah. It's worse than anybody else I think you can point to. I think maybe Martin Bezzecchi is close because Martin's been riding weird and hurt and unprepared the whole season. Otherwise, you don't get in that range. And once I actually think over a race distance, Alex Rins has generally been sort of there or thereabout in the ballpark. I'd actually, over the full Yamaha lineup this past 2025 season, I trust him the second best out of the riders, indeed. But you can't, that's not the strength of the bike. You can't do much with that bike starting from where he is. I think the points are a massive red herring when you're talking about that part of the grid. You shouldn't really look at points because the points depend on who crashed out in front of you, fundamentally. So it's just all sorts of a skewed metric. So there's two questions. Was he really that close to Jack Miller, which is a tentative maybe? And is that good enough, which is a very clear from all three of us now?
The fundamental problem with your theory, which I don't disagree with, is that saying he's not very good at qualifying in modern MotoGP is like saying, but he was really good on Michelin's. It's the way that the sport is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of, it doesn't matter. It's not an excuse because it's what you
essential skill.
He can't qualify. Cool. He doesn't have the fundamental skill necessary to be fast in modern MotoGP.
Also, I do think it looks worse because he's up against an exceptional qualifier.
Yes, he is.
We talked about, it was Yamaha letting Fabio down. And one of the reasons I still think that is the case is because you look at everybody who is supposed to be good on this grid, and you selected Simon, Acosta, Quartararo, Marc Marquez as the three biggies. Yep. Everybody else who you could think of as has been very good at some point, has won a championship, could have won a championship. They've all had years somewhere along the line that were erratic or just a bit slow, or Pecco Bagnaia 2025. Quartararo, I don't think, even when he's been furious, you can pick a MotoGP season where you think he's gone off the pace, hasn't made the effort, hasn't made too many mistakes.
Weird in 2020, but
end of 2020 in weird circumstances.
Weird,
I think that's the closest it comes. And
to going off the boil,
and that was second. That was sophomore year when he was still very green.
Weird year to judge for everyone.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah,
Well, I don't think you have that with Fabio. So many times I've got to Sunday afternoon this year and gone, oh, well, Fabio was on pole. And you've forgotten that because he's been eaten up in the race and probably crashed out in fury. But you go back and, oh, yeah, Saturday morning he was on pole again. And so I've always felt that's the thing that has convinced me he's never held back in putting the effort in, even when he's been furious. And he is showing great qualifying form. So a 6/10 gap, I do think, honestly, 2/10 of that against anyone is just what Quartararo's qualifying speciality is producing. All that said, Rins is supposed to be good too. Rins isn't supposed to be a number 2 development driver. I've been watching a lot of 2015 Moto2 ahead of our special on that, which is another thing you can catch in the Members Club in the coming weeks. We revisit a lot of these guys as kids. Rins was extraordinarily good coming up to MotoGP and really highly rated and tipped for like proper stuff, much like a kind of Quartararo and all that crowd. He's not there to be around about the same place as the top satellite Yamaha rider, and it's sad because a lot of it is obviously down to the injury. But this is not what Yamaha hired Alex Rins for.
I mean, two things there. Firstly, this is relating to what we spoke about earlier, but I gotta cleanse the Top Rack palate a little bit, given the general. I want to say I've genuinely had my head turned a little bit by the testing stuff. Like, I feel slightly different than I did before, and it's like the vibes are really good. That's all I want to say. The vibes are really good, and it means that if a few things come together, then this actually might have a higher ceiling than we think it does. But also, the fact that Yamaha did this makes me think it is actually more ambitious about 27, 28 than maybe I am for them, because otherwise this makes no sense at all. Otherwise you never do this. But that's one. The second one on Rins specifically is he sounded kind of jazzed about the V4, more so than any of the other, at that point, current Yamaha riders, more so than Fabio Quartararo, more so than Jack Miller. I would say Jack's been reasonable okay with it, but not as excited about it as Alex Rins. More so than Miguel Oliveira, who's not going to get to ride it, so maybe not the most relevant.
Who has never rode it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Denied. But there is, at least, I think, a morsel of hope within Alex Rins that has not been dashed by trying the bike, that it's just fundamentally going to work a little better for him than what this M1 has been. And look, do I believe that? Probably not. Probably I don't.
I think he has to feel that.
But he has to feel that way. And we'll only really know come season opener next year, whatever track it is. I don't remember. Thailand, I presume. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the Rins kind of, the lowest point of the season for Rins was Silverstone. And I've just double checked the numbers. Qualified P12, 1.2 seconds off pole man Fabio Quartararo, and finished the race in P13,
right,
which should have been P14 when Quartararo won it.
Yeah.
And Alex Rins is a Silverstone race winner.
Yeah.
That's
that
what
race
makes
win as well was
exactly
Rins, wasn't it?
He's so good at Silverstone. It's one of his tracks. And that, to me, is kind of the story of the season, especially at that point in the season.
I don't want to position myself as any sort of infallible data oracle or anything, and my rankings are total nonsense and not scientific. But I want to say I put him 17th that weekend, and his average for the season is 15.7. So
that stands out.
In a way, it was another weekend for Alex Rins in the year 2025.
Yeah.
We had loads of questions in the final part of the season that was not so much questions, more opinions about the quality of MotoGP without Marquez there and how much more unpredictable and open everything felt. We had a bit of a groundswell of going, yay, this is great, but also people going, it's a bit flat. You haven't got Marquez there. Not that Jorge Martin had been competitively relevant, but you're missing the other, the defending world champion as well as the current one. And in practical performance terms, you're missing the previous two-time one as well, because Pecco Bagnaia was making up numbers. So was that open and exciting? Was it a bit... Julian in the Members Club says, what can and should Liberty Media do to capitalise on the momentum it's got from this time? Mark isn't going to be around forever. The sport needs to build up its other riders to generate more interest. Fair point from Julian there in terms of maybe even if it was more exciting without Mark in some ways, all the attention is still on Mark. And we see from our traffic figures and our data and our numbers how much of a draw Mark Marquez still is to the casual audiences. I've given Jay the first half of the podcast, but I will just chuck in that he just suggested it was better off without Mark. But the flip side, we had a question from Matt, but not me, saying it feels like the season is ending with a whimper with no Marquez, no Martin, nothing really on the line. What do you think MotoGP should have done to avoid this scenario? I imagine it's costing it precious eyeballs. So you guys do go into this bit in a video, which we're going to have out on our YouTube channel in the next week or so. So partly because we've already blown our runtime, we'll keep this one fairly concise. But Simon, in a nutshell, was MotoGP 2025 the un-Marquez version better or worse? And what should Liberty and MotoGP have in mind around that going into next season?
I mean, I think it was better, but not substantially better at the end of the season. It was good. It was because we had fresh faces. But this brings us, I mean, Julian's kind of answered his own question to an extent. What do Liberty need to do? They need to stop pointing the cameras at Marc Marquez and only Marc Marquez, even when he's winning. They need to start building storylines around other guys. We need to stop hyperfixating on Marc Marquez the exact same way that we hyperfixated on Valentino Rossi 15 years previously, and then saw audience numbers crumble whenever he left. I'm so sick of saying it. Dorn are bad storytellers. They tell the easy story, which is Marc Marquez, and there's so much more, and we've seen there's so much more in the end of the season. And then Marc Marquez turned up at Valencia, and suddenly we saw more of him during the race watching trackside than we did of some of the guys in the race who we were actually able to watch in previous weeks. We saw more of the midfield battles without Marc, because there wasn't a need to have a camera on Marc and Alex whenever they were riding 1-2 a second clear of each other. The answer lies in that. It's just stop focusing so much on him, because do we need to? Like, does MotoGP? I get that he is Marc Marquez and what he's doing is phenomenal, but like the way to cover this year's story of Marc Marquez was with the killer MotoGP documentary that they didn't make.
Yeah.
Instead of by showing Marc Marquez riding around a second clear of everyone else at the end of a race.
I'm going to come in quickly before Val replies to slightly defend the Marquez fixation, because I think you could look at a lot of our coverage and say, well, you're doing the same. The reason we often do the same is, so throughout, I've been in various forms of motorsport journalism for 27, nearly 28 years now. Sales and audiences, whatever you're in, magazines, whatever, you've got to get the numbers. The popular people and popular things get numbers. I think that is even more difficult to avoid in algorithm universe in the 2020s, where all your feeds are going, this thing's popular. If you do more of this popular thing, we'll make you more popular. The exponential gain from doing more of the popular thing is bigger than ever. It's why F1 is sucking the oxygen out of everything, because it's being fed to people in a much more aggressive way than ever before. The way to get around that, I think, two ways, I would say. One is just be shameless about it. If you have to use Marquez as a route to talk about other people and make more Marquez adjacent storylines that shine a spotlight on someone else, do it. We probably should do more of that, in fairness, as well. I think Dorna certainly should. The other way is, in fairness, Liberty did very well with F1, making F1 massive at a time when it was being completely dominated by one team, the clearly superior driver at that point. Yeah. And it made stars out of people like our incoming MotoGP team boss, Gunther Steiner, for being really sweary about his team being crap. And that is where, okay, that can't pull the same documentary that everyone watches in a lockdown trick again, but that knack for going, this is an interesting thing that's going on.
I agree.
I'm going to jump in on you, Val, before you go in. Sorry, just to say, I think that in defense of ourselves, I think that we've done more coverage of the back half of the grid relative to the front half than Dorna have. I think we're actually quite good at that.
Yeah, potentially.
I also think that's exactly it. That's what Liberty did. They started at the back of the grid with Drive to Survive.
Yeah, they deserve a lot of credit for the fact, like, we've watched some really poor, not maybe individual races, but like as a season narrative.
Yeah,
Lewis Hamilton dominated seasons and Max Verstappen dominated seasons, and we've managed to have stars cultivated in Formula One outside of that. And clearly, MotoGP has not even really totally succeeded at that with the actual guys who were winning the championships with in Marc's absence. But again, look, I don't think it's necessarily an easy undertaking where there's a perfect formula to it. And I think for me, the more interesting question, because I don't know how to solve this one necessarily. I personally, I feel like if I was there, I'd probably be doing an even worse job. in terms of marketing a lot of those guys. As interesting as they find all of them, I probably find them interesting in ways that the general public does not. I'm 100% sure of that. But for me, the bigger question here, the question that interests me more, is among the hardcores and among the grid, etc. In Mark's absence, what do you do about the crisis of legitimacy? And because that's 100% a thing for me. Like, in Mark's absence, I'm sorry, we have an imposter on the throne every weekend. Who's this guy? Well, he didn't beat the best. He didn't beat Marc Marquez, who was winning every race and every sprint in the exact same way, basically every time at the start of the year, who would be running, I don't know, third, second behind somebody at a halfway point, and then just suddenly, oh, I'm a second quicker at the end of the race because I was just sitting around there. You need for that story to be told easily, and for people, I think, to be more excited. You need a legitimate transition of power, which obviously wasn't going to be a case with a mid-season injury, etc. But it is, for me, we've spoken about this in the video, but it's worth bringing up again. For me, it is important for MotoGP's future health that we get a rider who is a Marquez beater, or at least in the conversation with, if Marc Marquez does the reverse top rack Razgatlioglu and goes to World Superbikes, we need our Nicolo Bulliga.
Yeah.
And we don't have one so far. Marco Bezzecchi did a real good job sort of positioning himself as one, potentially. Fabio Quartararo, as soon as he gets a good bike, will be in the conversation. Pedro Acosta can be in the conversation. Pecco Bagnaia theoretically should be in the conversation, but after 2025, I don't want to talk about it. But this is the transition of power issue for me that we didn't even have with Rossi necessarily, because Rossi stayed around long enough to decline to start being beaten by people. Mark, every time he's absent, I do understand the natural reaction of, where's the king?
Yeah.
Where's the guy who all comers should go through? How can you be a legitimate, obviously, Raul Fernandez's win is super valuable, as is Fermin Aldeguer's. Obviously, Mark doesn't win every race. He doesn't, he's not an automatic tick in every, but over any sort of sustained stretch of form, where's Mark? I understand that impetus completely. Where is Marc Marquez? So, yeah.
If we weren't doing badly on the runtime, I would channel Val's NFL diversions to do a long analogy about comparisons with World Cup climbing and Janja Garnbret, because my wife and I are obsessed with that, and it's such a similar storyline with the queen of that world taking half a season off and lots of other people winning, and then she comes back and it's like, oh, maybe that wasn't so good.
Is that
but
the Slovenian, Slovakian?
Yeah, we're very obsessed with World Championship climbing. Yeah. Simon, I'm not going to go there. You carry on.
I'm not going to counter Val's point, because I've done that in the video that's coming soon about legacy and measuring yourself. I will just say I've done some research that I probably should have done before the podcast while Val was talking. And the statistically worst driver in the Formula One grid who has done the whole season is Gabriel Bortoleto.
Yep.
Who's the back of the points apart from the whole two. And he has more followers on Instagram than everyone on the current MotoGP grid apart from two people. And Lewis Hamilton's dog has more Instagram followers than the 2023 MotoGP, or 2024 and 2023 MotoGP World Champions.
Yeah.
That's starting from the back of the grid and building your audience from there. And that's what we need to do. That's what Liberty needs to come and do here. Because, I mean, for one, that's how you make all the teams valuable, which is what the teams want to be. They want to be valuable. But secondly, it's how you bulk out the sport. It's how you create room for everyone. Which once again gives me the opportunity to say that I'm really glad that there is now an F1 adjacent MotoGP team that has not just Maverick Vinales, but also Jorge Lorenzo in the garage every weekend next year.
We've got a few questions to get through, and we're running long. I've used a terrible segue to do a bit of plugging again. As we're bad at the concept of time, we need calendars. Our MotoGP calendar is now available for 2026 in the race shop. I was part of the picture selection panel for it. It's lovely images from Golden Goose, beautifully designed by podcaster regular Ollie, and there's a discount for the Black Friday deal right now. Use code BF20 in the race shop. If you're part of the Members Club, you get discounts in the shop all year round. So if you realise in March you really need a calendar, it's even got MotoGP race dates handy for us, especially Val. Go and buy one. End of plug. Back to the concept of time. I'm going to finally let you talk about Vinales and Jorge Lorenzo in a roundabout way. Alan in the Race Members Club says, if Maverick Vinales had stayed fit all season, would he have won a race? Let's add to that. If Maverick Vinales had stayed fit all season and had Jorge Lorenzo coaching him, would he have won 6 races? Val.
No, he would have won the championship, obviously. No, I don't think he would have won a race because Pedro Acosta didn't win the race. And I think by the time Maverick got injured, Pedro was breaking him a little bit to use cycling parlance, I guess.
This is going to be really controversial, but Maverick Vinales is better than Pedro Acosta. On
winter testing.
The like 3 days a year where he wants to be. He's the best in the world.
Maybe. No, I know what you mean, but I don't think so. I don't think he would have.
I think there's certain races where Acosta was looking competitive, and if Maverick had been fit and in the right headspace, he'd have won them because he's Maverick and he does that weird thing.
It was a good Maverick season until he spent the second half of it trying to ride himself back into fitness and then realizing, wait, the doctors are telling me not to do this? ? Which, by the way, the messaging around Maverick's injury, terrible.
No, the messaging around Maverick's injury was perfect. In that Maverick came back and the doctor said, the doctor said this should have taken 4 to 6 months, but I'm back in 2 weeks and I'm just going to see what happens. The doctors were right from the beginning. Like, the messaging was correct. Maverick was ignoring the messaging as he gave it to us.
It's like the way he spoke about it was like, yes, I need to ride to rebuild it. And then 2 weekends later, actually, I should not have been doing any of this.
Yeah. And then come back again and be like, oh, actually, no, they're still right.
Ridiculous. Yes. Anyway, I think he has had, aside from that part, he has had a really, really good season. I do think there's been a bit of mythologizing going on around over how good that part of the season was at the start of the season. It
was really good. I know. I'm like Captain Vinales skeptic around here even more than Simon, but the good bit was really good.
I think you guys are overcorrecting slightly on that one, I believe. And I think people have sort of chosen to ignore the fact that by the time Maverick went down with injury, Acosta had sorted himself out.
No, I'm with you on that.
There's a lot of credit even within the KTM structure also, including from Acosta. He definitely mentioned it in Valencia, that the way Maverick approached this bike was actually a very handy sort of navigational tool for everybody in the program. And that sort of Maverick, they don't go into specifics, but basically found the key of how to ride it, how to set it up, etc. with his side of the Tech 3 garage. But I think that's being oversold slightly into the Maverick was the new spearhead of the KTM project until he went down. It was still Pedro, and it was still, I'm convinced that if Maverick stayed fit, he would have had a good season, but it was still going to be Pedro, and then Maverick would have been a clear second in terms of pace. And then in terms of actual like point standings, I'm afraid to say anything because I don't know. I don't understand.
No, I agree.
What goes on there sometimes. I just don't think the KTM, even on Maverick's super good occasional weekends, I'm just not sure it was ever quite strongly in position to, I can't think of a specific weekend. Motegi, maybe. And
maybe
Pecco Bagnaia basically walked on water in Motegi, so...
Before Simon comes in, I just want to reply to your point about not knowing what would have happened with the points. I think the other complication there is the other half of the KTM quartet is people who are quite good at scoring a lot of points while not actually being very quick across the weekend.
100%. That's exactly it.
It's kind of the opposite talent to Vinales. Simon?
I still stand by Maverick being really, really good on the day. And actually, this is where the Lorenzo thing is interesting.
Yeah, is Lorenzo what Vinales needs?
Well, Jorge Lorenzo was unstoppable on his day. Whenever everything lined up right, he was unstoppable. We've just watched 2015 season, and he was either winning the race by 10 seconds or his visor was falling off and his head with it. Yeah. And if Jorge Lorenzo can unlock the Maverick Vinales potential on a more regular basis, I don't know where the limit is, because he is that good. He's the fastest rider in the world for 45 minutes a year. Didn't someone say that in a question earlier this year in the pod? And it's so true. It's so on the money. And if Lorenzo can just unlock that a little bit, steer him away from dodgy investments in Ferris wheels and let him be fit, help him be fit to ride, I mean, there's a really high ceiling. The problem is I don't know if Jorge Lorenzo is in any way qualified to do this, or if he has any understanding of why he is like this. That's the bigger question for me here is like, is Lorenzo capable of teaching other people to do what he does? Because if he can, I mean, I think that their claims of fighting for a championship are wild, but beyond that, the potential is really high from it.
I think even way before this tie-in, or for me, Jorge Lorenzo has always been the platonic ideal of a rider that Maverick Vinales can be. Like Jorge Lorenzo is the perfect version of Maverick Vinales in a sense. He's basically Maverick Vinales who
more often.
No, who can ride on the opening lap. I think that's the big difference. Can start and can position himself very well in the opening lap. Beyond that, I think there's a really comparable situation going on there in where these are both riders who, if you give them a clear track and sort of the conditions that they want and just everything goes more or less decent over weekend, they will do something special. But if you knock them a little bit and you unsettle them, and okay, Maverick gets more easily unsettled than Jorge probably, although it's very different MotoGP we're speaking about, so it's hard to compare definitively. I mean, for Jorge, being unsettled in that era still meant coming home fourth or crashing in the rain. It's the two things: coming home fourth, crashing in the rain. For Maverick, being unsettled in this era is coming home 10th, 11th, 12th, blah blah blah, 15th. But it's a different sport fundamentally at this point in time. I do think that for me, even taking aside the fact of how Jorge Lorenzo is going to try to make Maverick Vinales into himself, I don't know how easy that is to make to somebody else, especially when these are two guys who are particular. I mean, both of us have, I don't think I've actually ever spoken to Jorge Lorenzo, I'm not sure, but definitely like Simon has a ton of experience conversing with Jorge Lorenzo.
Lots.
And both of us
was that face a coincidence?
and both of us know Maverick Vinales as a sporting figure quite well. But for me, this will sound very stupid. He needs Valentino Rossi as mentor. That's the guy he should have had. Valentino Rossi is what Maverick Vinales never was, which is a guy who can be slow out of the blocks and then just gradually figure out his way through a weekend to get into a respectable position basically every single time. And there's a bit of riders, obviously, a few riders in MotoGP who are like that, but Maverick Vinales kind of needs to be that. It's like he's a guy who maybe improves the least against a fantastic baseline. Whereas Valentino Rossi was kind of late era. Valentino Rossi was sort of the master of improving upon a poor baseline, I would say generally. But I don't know how you teach that, I guess. And it's, for me, it's got to be the job, you would say, of the crew chief. Who's Maverick's crew chief now? Esteban Garcia, is it still, or is he? Yeah. But Maverick has had a few crew chiefs and none of them have been able to solve this particular puzzle. So I don't know. Do I feel particularly good about this being a massive game changer for Maverick? No, but I've always been a guy who thinks he doesn't need that much. And we just don't know what it is that he needs, but I don't think he needs that much. It's just that it's one of a possible 50,000 things that if he finds before he retires, he can win a bunch of races. And look, I don't want to talk championship, but I want to do it. I make myself sound stupid every time. Anyway, he could do it. It's doable.
I know how to solve it.
Okay,
I've just figured it out in my head, and I'm going to sell.
Ferris wheel thing.
I'm going to sell the idea to Jorge Lorenzo, and the payment for it is that we're going to be allowed to go and watch it, and video it, and put it on the YouTube channel. Right? Okay. It's a series of one lap races around go-kart tracks with Maverick Vinales on like a Moto3 bike, and then a bunch of lunatic Spanish kids on Moto2 bikes. Where it's like immersion therapy, where he's just forced to get battered around in the first lap over and over and over again. So there's a Royal Air Force training course that lasts 2 weeks, right? That whenever you're becoming a fighter jet pilot, you do all your training and like you start in a little turboprop plane, and then you go into a little jet trainer, and then you start doing like high speed maneuvers. And there's a certain group of people who, whenever they get to that point, discover that they get airsick.
Right.
And the Royal Air Force have already invested like £1 million in your training at this point. So they don't just wash you out. They put you in the backseat of a 2-seater fighter jet and fly you through mountains for 2 weeks until you puke it out of your system. And basically that's what Lorenzo needs to do to Maverick. He needs to puke the opening lap out of him.
You know what? I thought this was going to be ridiculous. Actually, the more you were speaking about it, the more like, I kind of get it. I see
a lot about both of you, I think. We're going to throw in a hypothetical to finish, because I think this is a point where we go, let's, rather than try and cram in another 17 questions into 1 minute and 50 seconds, let's go. I will let you have your tangent at the end, Simon.
Thank you.
Do the next questions properly in a separate episode. But one hypothetical I want to throw in. When I was thinking about this morning, I was like, how did they get on as teammates? Because, of course, Vinales has been everywhere so much. I was like, there must have been a time when they were... No, they weren't, of course. Lorenzo leaving Yamaha for Ducati creates the Vinales Yamaha seat. But let's reimagine this as quickly as we can. Rossi goes wherever for 2017. It's Lorenzo and Vinales at Yamaha. With those two at that age and at that point in their careers, how does that go?
I would rather see Lorenzo joined Maverick at Suzuki in 17.
That could be really good.
That would have been really, really cool. That had a higher ceiling, I think. I think it ends up with Lorenzo still being ahead of Maverick at the end of the year, but both of them behind Marquez.
I don't doubt that element. I'm just curious, like, who would actually be faster?
Lorenzo would have been... Maverick would have been faster on the day, but Lorenzo would have been more consistently faster and would have finished ahead of him in the championship.
Do you think that might have re-stirred Lorenzo's mind game habit a bit as well, if he'd ended up against a kid like Vinales?
I mean, Rossi played fantastic mind games against Vinales that year. And I think,
you wouldn't have liked that, Lorenzo. You wouldn't have liked being a teammate to the heir apparent, basically. No. I think that would have hurt him almost as much as the Rossi situation did, potentially. I think Lorenzo would have been better, but it's also, there's a small part of me that wonders whether it would have actually worked out better for Yamaha longer term.
Go on.
I don't even...
I'm not sure it would have. I don't think there's a question there. They held on to Rossi too long and it damaged the project. Because he was crap at the end.
I also think, Rossi was I think crap's too strong a word.
He was definitely crap at Petronas.
That's
different.
Yeah.
I think Lorenzo has built up enough credit with me as a guy who's very good to have anchoring a bike's development. And I'm comparing him to Rossi. So by this measure, you're kind of denigrating Rossi a little bit, but he's similar enough to Vinales that they would be more.
They would have liked the same thing
potentially. Yeah, that's my feeling. Might not be based on anything too concrete. Might just be sort of stereotyping.
No, I think they've got a fairly similar, quite neutral riding style.
Quite balanced riding style.
Yeah,
and they're also occasionally the same guy. But I don't. It might have worked better. I think it might have worked better despite it being slightly more openly dramatic occasionally in the media than Vinales Rossi ever was. Vinales Rossi, for all the, for what Simon mentions in terms of the behind the scenes mind games, never really
didn't kick off
meaningfully kicked off in any way, shape, or form. No. I think publicly. I can't
Rossi
remember
always had the advantage.
I can't remember a single flaw. There was something about Rossi crashing out while chasing Vinales at Le Mans in 17 that one of them wasn't happy about, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah. Otherwise, never anything. So it was more like the most memorable episode in that whole partnership is when Yamaha brought out technical leaders to publicly apologize in front of him. One of the...
Oh yeah, that was
a move that has not aged particularly well, but also was very dumb at the time. So
that was a weird evening.
Yeah. More Lorenzo coming up, by the way, in the Race Members Club when we play a little interview Simon got with him. Many of you guessed right who we were talking about 2015, in which we just re-stir all that again with Lorenzo and then we chat about it afterwards. That'll be at some point.
I'd like to say that I didn't fully intend to re-stir the whole thing, and then he did.
Oh, wow. Fine. Simon, before we close this episode, you are allowed... Yes. Simon asked for any other business 30 seconds during the ad break, which means he wants to rant about something. So, Simon, floor is yours.
Las Vegas Grand Prix last weekend. Carmelo Ezpeleta went to Vegas for the weekend. Colleague Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal posted a photograph of him sitting in F1 hospitality where he looked like someone that had sneaked in. It could not have been more different from whatever you see like Stefano Domenicali turn up at a MotoGP race and look, glamorous and Italian in the grid. Carmelo did not look glamorous. And Spanish TV DAZN, who does the F1 and MotoGP coverage in Spain, kind of cornered him for a quick interview, and they got onto the subject of street races, and he said, oh yeah, we could totally have a street race in MotoGP, and he is a crazy old man yelling at clouds who should not be listened to in the slightest, because we can't have MotoGP street races. He's mental. It's the silliest thing he's ever said. It's just impossible. The closest thing to a circuit that F1 has, street circuit that F1 has that MotoGP could race at is Australia, is Albert Park, I think. Yeah. And I went to Albert Park this year to see if it was possible, and it's not possible. It's just way, way too dangerous. And whenever Dorna preach on so much about safety and then Carmelo says something like that, you just think you're an idiot because you make yourself and your organization look stupid.
I think that we've seen a suggestion. I've seen a suggestion somewhere online. I didn't look into it too well as to where it came from because I did not know the segment was coming up, not because I'm a lazy bastard. But there was a suggestion he meant Yas Marina, which isn't really a street circuit, but it's kind of
not a street circuit.
No. I mean, he mentioned Mandalika as a street circuit. It's not a street circuit.
That was described as a street circuit when it was being built. And it's very obviously not a street circuit, is it?
Yeah.
But even like Yas Marina's obviously a no-go because of that final sector. So,
of course.
No. I do
There's
not
enough
like
options there to do something different, but why would you want to? Just don't go there.
No.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, it's anywhere in the Middle East that we want to go to, they'll just build another circuit for MotoGP, surely, because that's how it works.
Yeah. But don't we want the season to finish in Abu Dhabi, like we said a couple episodes ago?
Absolutely.
Qatar, we said.
Absolutely. Oh,
all right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But
Qatar is a lovely circuit.
For racing.
Yeah.
Right. So we've covered the news of the winter so far and agreed that Vinales being coached by Rossi might work. MotoGP street circuits won't work. Thank you very much for your questions that have shaped this episode. We'll just rattle through loads more of them through the winter and chuck them into all other episodes. See you again next week.